Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm delighted that you could join us on the podcast and on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to get all the breaking news at your fingertips, you can download the PLZ Soccer app as well. I'm delighted in the studio with me, Hugh McDonald, Alison McConnell, and our special guest, David McCarthy, as well. It's like a reunion for me and David. It makes me feel really, really old.
Because you are.
Yes, absolutely. That's a minor technicality. But we all started out, David was at the Evening News, I was at the Radio 4th. Hugh, it's amazing how time flies.
That's Edinburgh, eh? That's, oh goodness, I didn't know they had media in Edinburgh.
Well, that's alienated half the audience right away. We've got lots to talk about. Of course, Scottish football is it's the game that keeps on giving. But one of the first topics we're going to discuss is something that our old comrade Stephen McGowan highlighted, which is possible league reconstruction. It's up for debate whether anybody is actually going to vote for change is another matter. There's a general feeling that although they're going to discuss it, it'll be kiboshed. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's got any chance of ever becoming a realistic fixture going to 10 teams. I think it'd be really unpopular. I think it'd be popular possibly with Celtic and Rangers, fewer games, but for everyone else, it's not going to fly. I think the topic of league reconstruction may be under consideration, but the chances of a 10-tier top flight, I don't see.
Well, what's apparently going to be discussed as well as 10 is maybe 14, maybe 16, Hugh?
Yeah, I think discuss being the point. I mean, this is going to be. It's funny because I was at Ayr United Dunfermline on Saturday, and I was in the hub there before it. Talking to fans. Ayr United. There was almost 4,000 there, and a bit of buzz about it. And they were saying, "Imagine this was a 16 league. This was a first, a Premier Division match, 16-team league. This would be great." But the two falling points with everything is that you've got to have. I mean, this is real politics. You have to have 4 Celtic Rangers games a season, right? That's what it's all about. And second, there's a clash with that because Rangers and Celtic are saying, well, we want to cut at least 2 games from the fixture list, so we want to take it down to 36 at least, maybe take it a wee bit lower. But I don't know how they solve that equation. And
Can I offer it to you now? If you had a 16-team league, everybody plays each other once, so that's 15 games. Then you split into 2 halves, and then the top 8 play each other a further 3 times, which gives you 21 games. So that's 36. So that takes away 2 games. There's your 16 in a nutshell. I was looking at it this morning and I thought to myself, well, fine, you've got that 15 games where everybody gets a chance to play each other. You can still then revert to in the top 8 that situation where everybody gets their 2 home games, but it's competitive. The problem with it, David, is quite simply that as well as the obstacles that Hugh's highlighted here, the fans who really want change, they'll not be considered. This is purely a business decision.
Yet again, the fans will be the last people to be consulted on it. The 10 thing just doesn't fly for so many reasons. And fair play to Stephen McGowan, actually, because it's a really good story. And we were talking earlier before we came on here that it's amazing how when a journalist leaves one newspaper to go to another, he comes up with a blockbuster in his first week. So fair play to Stephen for that. But that, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. There is no way. I think they need 11 out of the 12 Premier League
That's the other
teams
problem is the
to actually vote for it, and 75% of the Championship and League One clubs, I believe, would have to vote for it. It's just not going to happen. What it needs is, whether it's 16 or 14, because there is a way of doing 14 as well, where you can split and have a 6 and an 8 after the split. I think the game desperately needs to have a pathway, a better pathway for clubs with big fan bases like Dunfermline. I know they're struggling in the Championship just now, but your Dunfermlines, your Falkirks, who probably will be in the Premier League next year anyway. But teams like that, Ayr, as you mentioned, giving them a much better opportunity to get into the top flight than what they've got at the minute. Because right now, it's the playoff system's so skewed in favour of the Premiership teams. Who have basically got one tie to play, haven't they? The team that finished second bottom, it was one tie to play, whereas you could be 4th in the Championship and you've got to come through 2 ties before you get to the Premier League team, you know,
Yeah.
in the playoff.
I mean, if you look at it, you've got Celtic, Rangers, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs, Dundee United, Dundee, Kilmarnock, St Mirren, Motherwell, St Johnstone, Ross County. Now, for the time this, if it was voted in 26-27 season, you could have the likes of Falkirk, Partick Thistle, Livingston, Dunfermline. Now, I know Livingston don't have a huge fan base. Maybe it's an Ayr United that replaces. I don't know, you know. But there's certainly clubs there who would add to the top flight. That's the first thing about it. The other aspect of it as well is, you know, we should be looking to. I remember we had Lachlan Cameron on the show, and he was looking at the kind of an Americanization of our game to work out ways to make it more appealing. I mean, some people say, "Oh, wait a minute! If you had 16, there's that dead area in the middle where teams have nothing to play for. well, why not make it a trophy in the middle? Why not make, you know, the battle at the bottom end is for a trophy for the team who finishes top of the bottom 8 or top of the bottom 6, whoever, who basically gets a financial reward at the end of it. I mean, you know, make something meaningful out of it.
Not having that.
Well, at the end of
a trophy for to celebrate being the best of the worst.
Well, can I tell you something? They have a trophy for somebody who's finished third. They have a trophy for somebody who's finished third in England. You have to have something as an incentive to keep it alive. I mean, you say you're not having it, but we've already got that situation at the moment. Once you get to the team who's finishing second bottom, then they do a lap of honour because they've stayed in the division. I mean, come on.
Doing an open top bus parade with a trophy.
The lap of honour and stuff like that's relief.
You need to come up with something though, because
I agree with that.
That's the obstacle. That's the obstacle about it. Is quite simply, you know, they're going, oh well, there's dead games for us. Well, at the end of the day, the other aspect of it, which I think is why I'm really pro 16, is there's also a situation where you only have one relegated and one playoff, and the other teams get a chance to blood the youngsters, to play in games where we're going to have a chance to have more Scottish players getting a run out, getting a chance to get to 50 or 100 games. We've got to come up with something. It might not be the cup for the middle cup, but it's got to be something that suddenly gets those teams saying, well, we're going to get a financial reward at the end of this. Make it more lucrative for them to finish 8th, you know, or 9th and 10th and 11th, you know.
But you're being ambitious and proactive and creative and trying to solve things. The thing is going to fall, and what you have now in the bottom line of it, you have the decision makers actively making decisions that fans are against, right? Now imagine any other business. Imagine Marks and Sparks saying, "Well, we do a really good line and such. We're not doing that anymore." And the reason for it is, well, this I mean that every fan, if you said a 10, right, for example, I think you would struggle to find any fan, whether it be a Celtic or Rangers fan, Aberdeen, or any club, right down the league, would say that's a good solution.
Hugh, if anybody voted for a 10, I would absolutely advocate for the dismantling of the SPFL board.
But the 10 would be the clubs, some clubs, particularly Celtic and Rangers, definitely Celtic and Rangers would want a 10. They would vote for a 10 now. They'll be lobbying. They'll be getting their. They know they're getting fewer games, so it takes 2 off it, and we've seen, the amount of games this season that the clubs have had to go through because the Champions League games have gone up,
and the international
calendar's gone up, and the League Cup's more games, the Scottish Cup. So they'll say get it down that, and they don't really care about playing teams 4 times or anything like that.
It would also become so much more cutthroat, and yet again, when that situation arises, managers fear for their jobs, ain't going to play young players. They're not going to bring them in because they just need old season pros that will get them.
That was the point Andy Walker was making on Saturday, and I was talking to Andy Walker. He was very prescient about it. He must have had a kick at Stephen's story. He said, if it comes, he said, I think there's more, because I was talking about, I've been in with the fans, everybody wants a 16. And Andy says to me, they may want a 16. He says, but the people who run Scottish football want a 10.
Aye.
He says, the other thing he says, he goes around does Scottish football. He says, I remember when I was at Motherwell, everybody talks about Lennon Miller coming through at Motherwell, and he says, it's terrific, it's wonderful. He said, but when I was at Motherwell, nobody was saying, he says, I was coming through Tom Boyd, Gary McAllister.
Yeah.
We were all coming through. Fraser Wishart. I mean, like 4 or 5 were in the team, very, very young. He says now what Premiership teams in Scotland are doing are recruiting from League One in England and the National League in England.
Yeah. Can I just highlight to anybody under the age of 30, the word, he must have had a wee keek at it, is an old Scottish word, which means he's had a wee look at it. As soon as he said that, I thought, my God, we should have got Billy Connolly on today. Fantastic, you. You always bring out a word that was from the playground in third year, don't you?
Third year 1923.
Yeah. Says David from that youthful
Exactly.
perspective. I'm thinking I'm dealing with a teenager here, but it was such a great word. But you're right, absolutely. Players coming through, players getting the opportunity to play. Interestingly enough, you know, Paul McStay, I never forget him saying this to me when we're talking about 10-team league, and he says to us, the reason why he hated it is because it got to the stage where players knew exactly what way you dropped your shoulder. They could second guess everything about you.
You could be playing 6 games a season, couldn't you? Against the same opposition, 2 in the cup and 4 in the league. Yeah, and the fans get fed up with that as well, you know?
Absolutely. I agree with you. I can remember one game, I don't know if it was Celtic or Rangers, but I remember a situation where there was 7 occasions where a team
That's
had
right,
met.
Celtic and Rangers, right? 7 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, you want variety, you want change, you want different fans getting the opportunity to sample games against the big clubs as well. And of course, you want that meritocracy of the ability to get into a top half. And suddenly, if a Dundee United or a Hearts don't make it, then tough. That's the nature of it. And the other thing about it, which we bleat on about, but in Scottish football, and I can't remember who it was that was talking about it, but we've all discussed it ad nauseum, is self-interest, David. Because quite simply, they vote against each other. They're actually like a scene from Family Guy where they all get into a pub and punch the living daylights out of each other. That's what it's like, isn't it?
Aye. No, but it always has been like that. You know, there will always be self-interest, which is also why, again, going back to this 10 thing, you know, are clubs going to vote when there are currently 12 teams in the Premier League or Premiership? Why on earth would any club vote to make that 10 and to constrict it even further when there's every chance that at some point they will drop out of that top 10?
Well, I'll give you why. Because what happens is somebody lifts the phone and says, by the way, we'll give you an extra $1 million. You'll get this. Then all of a sudden they're swayed. That's what happened with the 11-1 vote.
Yeah.
You know, people were basically bought off for it, you know. And I'm not saying in a kind of an illegal way. It was just the incentive was, if you do this, we'll get this, you know. And then everybody starts thinking for themselves. That's the way the whole thing. The 11-1 is a farce. That needs to be changed.
11-1 makes it impossible for any real change at all. It's almost.
Here's the catch-22. How are you going to change the 11-1?
Because
there is
you need
11-1.
there's an 11-1 vote.
Yeah, and the other aspect
Yes.
of it, and the other thing about it, which David Martindale was talking about, is quite simply working out a way, and this is where I actually looked at it and I thought, wow, David, you're looking for utopia here. He was talking about the need for, you know, even if it's some of the payouts that they get from Europe, if something could, you know, trickle down to the Championship to give clubs a chance to somehow benefit from that as well.
Yeah, that's not going to happen either.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's a great idea, and the theory behind it's laudable. It won't happen.
Yeah.
Because they've got Scottish football's going to come into a real problem, another problem as well, with teams coming up like Falkirk, etc., who then have to change their pitch to grass, which will cost more than £1 million. Now, for Falkirk to say, find £1 million and say, we'll try and sign Mbappe at the same time.
I don't think they have to do it if they go straight back down.
No.
You know, they've got a year's grace.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're going to stay as a Premiership club, which will be their ambition, they're going to have to find £1 million. Now, one way of finding that $1 million, which some clubs have banded together and made a presentation on, is to change the amount of money that is distributed through the UEFA participation money. So that'll be an interesting battle, because there you've got enough self-interest from one side and enough self-interest from the other to make it a pretty close vote.
Yeah, could I offer a sense of, and I think it's only right and proper that we offer a balance on this, and the flip side to what Neil Doncaster and the board would say, it's it's a record turnover of 44 million. So from their point of view, despite when we all look back at that line in the sand, David, of the debacle of the Setanta deal and then grovelling to Sky Sports, suddenly they've managed to get to a position of strength and bring in money, and he's to be given great credit for that.
Well, yeah, to a degree, but the bottom line here with that is that the product at the minute is actually reasonably successful. So why would you want to change it? More fans are coming into the game. Competitively, other than at the very top of the tree where Celtic have ran away with the league, there's actually been something. There is something to play for practically every season, and whether it's a relegation fight, whether it's a battle to get in the top six, whether it's a fight for European places, there is, we're getting into the tail end of the season now with everything basically still up for grabs. Punters are coming back as well. Crowds are up. Look at St Mirren's crowds compared to 4 or 5 years ago. They are coming back. So why would you want to change that?
Well, here's my question to all of you. Yes, they're coming back, but are they coming back to a product that is good quality? And my answer to that is, apart from Celtic running away with the league and Celtic and Rangers giving everybody a high from the European perspective, the standards are not there. You've got a situation where all the other clubs can't even get into the group stages of European football. And that's our standing, that's our level.
I think that's a different argument, because I think if you're we'll just use St Mirren again as an example. If St Mirren were winning every game 1-0, and it wasn't a particularly great game every week,
they'd be happy.
The fans would be happy because their team's winning.
Yeah, no, but the point I'm making here is, it's overall we're looking at the league offering us progress, giving us the platform for young players to play in, giving us the platform to progress in Europe, which will ultimately give us the platform to earn more money. We're not doing that. How do we develop the league? We've got to work out a way that develops the league, but also gives us an opportunity to progress in European football. I think it does have an impact on what you're doing at your size of the league, what you're doing with the quality of players you're given the chance, how much money you can get in there, and how is it going to give young players the opportunity, more of them, a chance.
Surely then that's an argument for stretching the league, making it bigger rather than making it smaller.
That's my argument. That's why I want it to be. That's why I want it to be 16. Although every time I turn to you, Ali, you're in such a bad mood today. You just kiboshed everything I've ever said. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. You've been an absolute barrel of laughs in this programme today.
I'll just leave.
No, I mean, listen, we've got to come up with something, and I wonder if there could be some kind of fan pressure on this. I wonder if it will gather pace, or they just have to resign themselves to, somebody saying, an accountant basically saying, this is the way it is, this is the way it's going to stay, you're just going to have to lump it.
I think it will, because one of the things about fans, and I've discovered this much more so, I've always known this, but I've discovered much more so by travelling about the lower leagues, the resilience of fans for going to games, the actual endurance and the perseverance and the importance of a Saturday game to fans is that if you look at all the stuff you name all the clubs, catastrophe has happened to, and and the fans just keep coming, they say, "Oh, that's it for me now." They're there the next Saturday. I mean, I just looked, and I was sitting at Somerset Park on Saturday, driving rain like tracer bullets coming across this park. Right, I was sitting there. I was texting my carer for dial-a-bus to come early. He'd take me back home. Getting somebody. Getting Roger Hannah to text from me. And say, "Can you get the dial-a-bus here and get back for the bingo, Miss Peter's party?" And I said, "There's nearly 4,000 people who have paid good money here today, including 1,000 fifers who have travelled to stand in the rain for a team that is in the relegation zone, and they've decided, because they're saying, this is the way I'm going to spend my Saturday. It's astonishing. The resilience for the attendances in Scottish football, and every day you pick up, it's one of the great almost untold stories now, is the way the attendances are going up and up. You know, you see in Twitter the other day, Hibs have now sold out more tickets than they have any significant...
It's comparable to
so
anywhere.
what they've got is literally a captive audience, because what they're saying as an organisation is saying to them, here's the product. It's going to be 10 or 12. It's not going to be anything else. We know you hate 10 or 12 because you've told us, but that's what it's going to be, so lump it. And the fans will go, oh, that's terrible, that.
And then still
Where are we going on Saturday? Are we away on Saturday? Get a ticket. Who's got the car?
Absolutely, because it is in our DNA of a social occasion as well. The only problem I would say to you, last season I thought was some of the worst football I've seen in going to games, and I go to lots of different grounds to see lots of different teams, and I just thought the standard was woeful. It's slightly improved this season, I have to say. I've seen some better games, you know, and I've seen, you know, Hibs actually suddenly David Gray has been given the time, David, to try and put a team together. But some of the football at times last season, I mean, I remember being up at Pittodrie to watch Aberdeen against Livingston, and at one point I looked over to Willie Miller and I thought, is there any chance you could get stripped and get on there and put a wee bit of class in this? Because it was dire.
Aye. And, you know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that supporters ultimately, if your team wins 1-0, it's the worst game in the world. You're still going home happy, but there has to be a bigger picture than that. And you're right what you said earlier on, that you have to get to a stage where the standard is significantly better than it is just now. I actually don't think it's been a great season again this season. I think there's still been a lot of mediocrity. It might be better than last season, but you know, we've all seen plenty of games where you're just thinking to yourself, if that was in the back garden, you just wouldn't open the curtains. And that's just there has to be a better solution than what there is just now. But the better solution is certainly no shrinking the league.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say to you, just as a footnote to this to finish it off, Ali, it's got to be the only organisation where I reckon the managers and the players, as well as the fans, want an extended league. I reckon they want it. You could still get 36 games. I reckon they want it. There's still a formula to give them the 4 games in the Celtic Rangers matches. But only people who are saying no are accountants.
Yeah, I think players would embrace any kind of variety. Anything that's going to give you a freshness to the league. Playing against different teams more often would be a winner, but they're not going to be consulted when it comes to making decisions. Yeah,
I saw one vlogger or somebody on Twitter who said, change it, do what the Belgians do. Let's go and try it. And if it doesn't work, then change it. It's not a crime. It's not a crime to change things, to alter it all. But whether that happens, I think the general consensus here is not going to happen. You know, give us your thoughts on that as well. We'd love to know what you think as a fan on what you'd like to see happen. That's just a flavour of what we've got here on the Journos. Now to a case which, again, a topic that we're going to talk about, which is difficult to discuss. There are obviously fine parameters, but I'm so glad I've got you three alongside us to tread along a very difficult topic, which is, of course, the Celtic abuse case, which has come out and resolved itself for the majority, but there's still some cases still to be resolved with regards to this case. And as you know, it was eventually brought to the court on an American-style class action, which has resulted in Celtic eventually, settling with a number of the people who were abused at Celtic Boys Club. It's a very, very difficult topic, and let's deal with this one first of all, which is quite simply, could it have been dealt with quicker, Hugh? Have Celtic covered themselves in any kind of... I mean, have they been tarnished by it?
Yeah, because no matter how it plays out, this was a complete no-win situation for Celtic. Imagine if they'd went to the court and they decided, you know what, Celtic Boys Club and Celtic are different, so you're not liable. They couldn't have called that a win. And, you know, that would have got them off the hook financially, but nobody in the world is going, well, that's a win. So the only way this is a win, and I think it's a very, very limited one, is that it gives some money and some consolation and perhaps some endorsement to the victims and their stories. But to describe it as a victory for anyone is, I think, if anybody, I know some of the victims, and if anybody says that they have participated in a victory, they have no idea of what child abuse has, the effect. This trauma happens when you're very young, very vulnerable, and it just doesn't go away. And it certainly doesn't go away when you've, in my experience, talking to these people, it doesn't go away no matter how much money you've got. Some of these people have been very successful in life, and anyway, you know, and money's not. So it's just an awful episode that has no redeeming features whatsoever. That's what I'm talking about. The language of victory, you know, it's just, it's very difficult to articulate the lasting pain. Very difficult to evaluate it if you're not involved in it. And it's the only thing you can take out of it is that in the intervening years, the protections for child, you know, for my age, when I was a youngster playing football, there was nothing. There was no protection whatsoever. The protection has come in now, you know, the certification of that. It'll still happen because these vile crimes will happen and that's the only thing you can see is that people are addressing it. Should they address it more? I say absolutely yes. I think it should be tightened up even further.
Yeah, the one element that Hugh highlighted there, David, is the fact that, you know, no amount of money heals the pain, but is there closure in people's minds, or is it still because they've been taken all the way down a road that's painful? Some people didn't actually see the end result.
I think there's closure in the respect that the legal side of it, but there can't ever be closure, I don't think, on the horrendous acts that were committed to these children, and that's exactly what they were. You know, and I actually think it's been shameful that Celtic went down the route of trying to prove that they were a separate entity, rather than, you know, coming out and owning it. I think it would have prevented much of the pain that these people have endured over the last 30 or 40 years in trying to get some sort of you know, closure on this, or some sort of validation for their complaints. So I do think Celtic could have handled this much more sympathetically towards the victims. I echo what Hugh's saying there as well about the fact that if there is any good to come out of it, it is that child protection measures have hugely improved. My own son's in the academy system at the moment, and the club that he's at places a huge emphasis on that child protection and well-being. And I'm not sure whether that would have been the case as strongly as it is now if this horrendous situation hadn't occurred.
Yeah, I mean, checks and balances that Hugh had pointed out there were not as predominant as they are now. Back in the 60s, I mean, when the club set up the Celtic Boys Club, I think it was 1966, you know, they were just not in place. And I have listened to several footballers who would say to me, you know, they knew it was going on, and they went out of their way just to avoid getting themselves into that situation. Some footballers, some young men were not as fortunate as that, and they were preyed upon when really all they had was hopes and dreams of playing for Celtic.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I think culturally we've moved on enormously since those times. I think if you go back to that period in time, the 60s or the 70s, an adult's word was seen as the oracle. You know, like you wouldn't listen to children the way that you would maybe give them their place now. It was a there was a real hierarchy. Mm-hmm. You know, like a teacher or anyone in any adult in any kind of authority would naturally be believed. And I think these topics weren't spoken about. They weren't brought into the open. there wasn't any avenues to explore them. I think it would have been very unusual for people to, I think in any situation like that, it must be tremendously difficult to find the courage to speak of it at any point. But to do so in a culture where it's not discussed, it's not spoken about, and there's every chance that people will dismiss you or not believe you. And then where do you go? You know, I think it would have been enormously hard. And I think what you think for the victims yesterday is that maybe finally there is an element of we've been heard, that somewhere and somehow our voice has been heard. And I think the pain for not just the victims but families that have carried it for generations now, and the ripple effect of what that does to people who love them and who share their lives with them and who watch the destruction that causes. I think there'll maybe be some vindication that finally there's an accountability of it, and there is an aspect of being heard, but there'll never be closure for people because it's lifelong. It's scars that stay forevermore. And I think the only thing you can say is that as a society we have changed and evolved, which is to be embraced. But it is a tawdry episode beyond that in Scottish football, and I would suspect it would have been pretty widespread at that point. It would not have been contained to singular clubs and only sport and only football. I think anyone that was attracted to working with young children and given that kind of exposure, I think you would have to be very, very careful about where it went.
Yeah, a couple of points before we finish on that topic. I think your paper was really at the forefront, the paper you used to work for, the Daily Record, in exposing this and certainly interviewing so many people in great detail to finally burst the dam and let other people feel as if they could come out.
The story was broken, Peter, 29 years ago by Anna Smith.
Yeah.
29 years since it came out in the open. And the victims this week have got some sort of closure on it.
Yeah.
You know,
some of the quotes, this litigation has been made far more complex and lengthy by the defender, while our clients have acted with resolute dignity throughout. This was the legal representation of the victims. At long last, they've achieved success and can take this compensation as confirmation that Celtic Boys Club was indeed inextricably linked to Celtic Football Club. And she said that obviously, in this case, they'd been very angry at how long it had taken to reach a conclusion, but there was now a sense of relief. And I think, you know, of the number of people who were involved at the Celtic Boys Club as well, I think one of them, Jock Stein, had thrown him out once it became apparent what he was involved in. But nevertheless, I think even if it's a legal technicality of arguing the case, Hugh, the evidence of Celtic looking at a natural progression from Celtic Boys Club to being able to play for Celtic Football Club was one that couldn't be denied.
I don't think it could be denied. Certainly, I was about at that time, and I see why it's been denied. By that I mean insurers, etc., etc. Their first thing is to say, right, we don't want to pay out. You know, why can you know, and that's why in certain cases I would say, they could at least apologise. And then you say, well, they're not going to apologise because that admits culpability. I mean, this agreement hasn't been fully thing, but there'll be legal minefield, the documents that'll have to be signed, you know, I would presume, to get this money. But yeah, I mean, 29 years, as I say, I know people that were involved in this, victims of this. I know of people who have died in that 29 years. That I would have said, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, I'm certainly not a psychiatrist, but I would say have died prematurely. And I personally would lay a lot of blame for their premature death on what happened to them as children. By that I mean they adopted lifestyles that were very dangerous to themselves. So I think, it's just been an awful episode for just for everybody involved in it. I mean, the 29 years is far too long. Nobody's going to argue with that. It's just far too long. The denouement of it to me, doesn't really solve anything. I'm glad that they've got vindication. I'm glad that their voices have been heard, these people, and I'm glad they've maybe got some money that they can, they can find some joy in life. But the closer you get to this thing, you're staring at, and I don't want to be going to the realms of hyperbole, but you're staring into pure evil. That's what you're staring at now. I don't think there can be much worse. We've all had children. Some of us have got grandchildren, and just looking at the vulnerability and the innocence of a child and how you can change that life, how you can shorten that life, how you can make that life hell, I think is the epitome of evil.
Yeah, just one final thought on it, and we're only dealing with the case that's come out, and that's why we're focusing our attention on it and the link to Scottish football and Celtic in particular. But one line that came out was there are others guilty of similar crimes, as the Scottish FA's independent review made clear. Historical sexual abuse in Scottish football was widespread and certainly not limited just to Celtic Boys Club. I think that part of it is where Hugh was talking about. Anywhere in those days where you had kids gathering with hopes and dreams in any sport, but particularly in football, which was so predominant and popular, there are cases elsewhere.
There will be cases elsewhere, absolutely, and you would like to think that the perpetrator of those crimes are also brought to justice the way that many of them have been at Celtic, and that somehow the victims, no matter what the club was, the victims find some sort of closure on that. But I think, as Hugh so eloquently said there, there really isn't any closure. There can't be any closure for the kind of things that have happened to these kids.
Yeah, absolutely. We've dealt with the issue. We've tried to be as balanced as we possibly can, and obviously offer our thoughts on the overall case. It's a difficult one, and something which I think, when there is a line in the sand, I don't think everybody will have closure on this one. It's a difficult topic, and one that I think tarnishes our game. Moving on to a couple of things. Very rare to get a chance to get you in. You've covered football right across the globe with the Daily Record and the Evening News as well. Have I missed anybody out that you were with?
No, well, Falkirk Herald.
Falkirk Herald.
As far as
I was going to say the furthest they got was a local derby against East Stirling.
Yeah, I'm not going to knock Falkirk. I was there yesterday. That whole place is buzzing. But as far as the way things are looking at the moment, interestingly enough, from a Rangers perspective, I'm desperate to ask you, would you give Barry Ferguson the job? What do you think is going to happen there?
I don't know if he'll get the job, obviously, but he himself is providing quite a compelling case for being in the conversation come the end of the season. To me, this might sound a bit simplistic, but to be a Rangers manager, what any Rangers manager has to do at the moment is, forget Europe, set that aside. They have to challenge Celtic. The way that a Rangers manager can challenge Celtic is to get a team that is capable of beating everybody else as regularly as Celtic beat them. And that should be possible. Barry Ferguson should be able to do that, given the budget that Rangers have got, compared to everybody else out with Celtic. If you can beat everybody else and take it down to a 4-game shootout against Celtic, I think you've got a chance of winning the league. And Barry Ferguson so far has shown that it is possible that could be done with him, but you don't know what the new owners are going to be thinking. They might already have a guy, in mind, maybe just waiting and the clock's ticking until the end of the season and he gets brought in. Yeah. But I think Barry has done himself no harm whatsoever so far.
He's turning into the Scottish Kevin Keegan, isn't he? If they score 3, he's going to have to score 4.
And what I really liked about his post-match at Dundee was the fact that he wasn't allowing the fact that they had come back and scored 3 goals in the last 15 minutes to turn a 1-3 into a 4-3. He wasn't allowing that to change his opinion that that was nowhere near a good enough performance. He knows that there is so many vulnerabilities in there, and basically it would be really interesting if he gets a job to see how many of them that he clears out, because I suspect there'll be plenty will be leaving at the end of the season if he gets a job.
And just on that, last question to you, David, on it, because it's something we're all interested in to hear your thoughts on it. Rangers in this takeover, obviously, you know, it's being pushed back, and there's all sorts of speculation on this has to happen before this can happen. I just wonder, as it heads back through to April now, and people have to renew their season tickets, if this falls by the wayside, it has financial implications for any manager of Rangers. You know, whether it's a Barry Ferguson, whether it's someone else, if this should fall by the wayside, Rangers have a difficult road ahead to even close that gap on Celtic. I mean, this has got to happen.
I don't think that there is really any way that they will close the gap if it doesn't happen. But to be honest with you, I don't really see any evidence that it's not going to happen. These kind of takeovers don't just take place in a couple of weeks, and I think that quite clearly before the story was broken, they were already a fair way down the line, and I do think it will happen. And for Rangers, it has to happen. It's as simple as that. They had to find new investment from somewhere. Now, I think as everyone seems to have been at pains to say, that when these guys come in, they are not going to throw hundreds of millions at it, because you can't anyway. You can't.
With the financial fair play.
But I think that there will be a general, a steady improvement and a way of finding a way to make them more competitive with Celtic, ultimately winning the league, which then gets you into the Champions League, which is when the riches start to flow into the coffers.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us your view on that. It's still an ongoing story, still waiting for it all to unfold and resolve itself as well, to give Rangers fans that real hope for next season, that there could be a real challenge, as David has mentioned. Now, we always criticise Scottish football at times for not taking into consideration how do we give all our clubs a catch chance in hell of getting past some of the qualifiers into group stages. I mean, I for one would absolutely love to see a Hearts, a Hibs, you know, a Dundee United just get into a group stage, you know, and get into a half-decent group stage. I mean, Hearts had a great chance a couple of years ago, Ali, to get, you know, what, £7-9 million in the coffers if they'd got to Europa League. But they ended up coming up against sides that they should never have lost against, you know. Now we have a situation where they're going to allow the clubs to postpone a league match if it comes in one of these European playoffs. And that, I think, is a step in the right direction.
I think it's common sense. I think it absolutely makes sense. I think you want to strengthen the hand of your teams to go and allow them to give themselves the best possible chance to make an impact in European football. It's given us plenty of copy down through the years when you think back to...
you say copy, or is it excuses?
all the seasons where it was a big talking point, like that Rangers in the Europa League final in Manchester, on the congested fixture list and the build up to it. But I think it absolutely makes sense. You see it's done in other clubs, in other leagues, in other countries, in other leagues. I think it's absolutely common sense.
Yeah, this will be only brought in for the playoff matches, but boy, David, if we don't get our act together as a country, then it's going to become mightily difficult to try and stay in that top 10 elite. We've dropped out of it, and this is why we're faced with... I mean, Celtic will play a qualifier next season to try and get into the Champions League. It becomes ever more difficult when you're getting 2 qualifiers, 3 qualifiers, and then you're coming up... By the time you get to the third one, you're coming up against an A-list side usually.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why, as Ali says, you know, it had to be done. It should have been done years ago. Our clubs really shouldn't be losing to League of Ireland sides and stuff like that in the qualifiers. But that's as low as we've got. Or a team from Luxembourg.
Yes.
Right.
The timing of the games is so... When you're playing games like that at the start, it can be your first competitive game of the season, can be a qualifier.
Yeah.
So you need absolutely every chance you can get. I also think it sets a precedent for, if you bring this in, that if you go deeper into the competition, it sets almost a precedent for being able to say, if you do go deeper, to say, can we have permission to rearrange a domestic fixture because we have this huge game coming up.
Yeah, always helps if you get better players to get them there, Hugh, isn't it?
Well, that's what it comes back to. I mean,
16-team league.
the two elements, the two elements that always strike me in Europe is when I look at teams, particularly Aberdeen, for example. I'm old enough to know they were one of the great European sides. And I think the stat is the last team to beat Real Madrid in their European final, beating Bayern Munich on the way there. I think Scottish teams, and I know that these days have gone, but I think Scottish teams at that level, the level below Rangers and Celtic, have really severely underperformed in Europe to the level it's sometimes inexcusable the way they've performed. Just routinely losing to teams that have got lower budgets than them. You can't point out and, it was the big boy did it. No, these teams are paid what you're being paid.
Are we guilty of, apart from anything else, are we oversimplifying it? Are we also guilty of maybe not looking at the way our teams play football? There's a certain way to play European football. There's a certain way that gets you through these games. I looked on with fear at the under-21 international last week when Iceland thumped Scotland. I'm thinking to myself, what kind of football are we playing that we're not getting past them? We're Hearts lost to Zurich. I mean, Swiss football's not bad, but they lost to a Zurich side that I thought were absolutely mediocre at best.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's just the thing about it is as well, I think if you look at the Scottish football clubs, and there's endemic reasons for us to do poorly in Europe, and they do poorly at selling players on, and the two might be linked. Hibs have sold on one or two, and we know that Lennon Miller will have done all right that way as well. But the level of creating players to sell them on, that model hasn't been adopted by really seriously by clubs. And I think it's what's coming. I think that'll be the biggest next move in the Scottish game, because you can already see at Hearts there's movement towards that, buying analytically or bringing players through analytically, trying to increase the academy, get that through and have a trading model. Yeah. And you see it through Scottish football. And I think at Rangers, this is the most intriguing thing out, because you're going to have, like David, I don't see any, anything can happen, but I don't see any signs that the deal is in any danger. It was pointed out to me the other day there by somebody says you've got a willing buyer and a willing seller, and that usually gets over any bumps in the road. But what I think is you're going to have really smart people in the building. You're going to, and they might get it all wrong, but they'll get it all wrong for the right reasons. If you know what I mean, they'll have a strategy. They'll have, what do we have to do here? Why? What is it? Why is the academy not one? Why have only got one or two?
But does analytics bring in foreign players, or does analytics favour Scottish players?
It could bring in foreign players, but if it brings in foreign players, what they'll be looking at, that they then, almost like the Celtic, what's happened there, we can sell them on, and then we can develop, and maybe the model might be, if clubs are producing, that they'll go right up the chain, and part of the chain might be really good players coming through Motherwell, Dundee United, Dundee, whatever, moving to Rangers or Celtic, moving to other leagues. Because the whole thing's a chain now.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to be positive in one sense. If I had said to you we've got 2 or 3 players playing in Serie A, you'd never have believed it, wouldn't you?
No, absolutely. And it shows that we do have players that are capable of moving away. And for so long, I mean, after Paul Lambert went to Dortmund, there was this fallow period where nobody did anything, in Scottish football. They never moved. And I don't know if that was part of a Scottish mentality that players themselves didn't fancy moving out of their comfort zone. But I think that once you get a couple of them doing it, obviously Aaron Hickey he was a success, and then others started to follow suit. And maybe now players are looking at it and thinking, well, if Billy Gilmour can go there, if Lewis Ferguson's obviously the great example, can go and do it, like the boy Max Johnson went to Austria. Yeah. Once a few start doing it, as a kind of the trickle can become a flood, and I think that there will be more players. Yeah, I think so. And to be honest with you, like, why would you not if you're given that opportunity? There's been a lot of talk about Lennon Miller maybe going to Celtic or something like that, but if Lennon Miller get the opportunity to go and play in one of the big leagues in Europe, Why would they not?
Although I have to say, just to counter, that we always sometimes are guilty of being insular and thinking of our problems and how we solve league structure, how we solve getting teams into Europe, how we solve getting more good Scottish players. I said to a couple of Italian friends of mine, great Scottish players are over in Italian football, and they went, yeah, because we've got it woefully wrong in Italy. Right. We haven't been anywhere near a World Cup final to win it, and the dearth of talent that they've got now. I don't know if you could rhyme off, 7 or 8 great Italian players now, whereas in our day, at the absolute peak when we could...
But it's all about standards, Peter, isn't it? Like, they're talking about winning the World Cup.
Yes.
We're just, we'd have a street party if we got to the World Cup. Right,
the other thing is relative as well. They won the Euros 4 years ago. So,
yeah, I know.
It's hardly a big drought. It's funny because I went over to Naples. I think it was earlier. No, it was last year about this time.
What a life you've got!
And I watched Napoli versus Juventus. And I was just thinking to myself, if you ever wanted to play football and to be a hero and to be loved in that, go to Naples.
Yeah.
Go to Naples. You can't walk down a street without... that was the season after they'd won the league. You literally couldn't walk down a street without bunting of all the players. You couldn't get in a shop and there wasn't something about Maradona in a shop, David. You walk into the most... I walked into this hotel, beautiful hotel, 5-star hotel, and there was this incongruous thing sitting in the corner. We'd never seen a 5-star hotel. A cutout of Maradona. They're like walking into Hilton and seeing a cutout of Gaza. You go, what's that doing there?
Well, can I defend our country and how fanatical we are as a country, Hugh? I ran into Arthur Newman last week, and I said to him, he's a brilliant lad, great player, and I said to him, do you miss Scotland? He says, my wife regrets us moving out.
Really?
He said that we love Scotland. He says in the Netherlands they don't really celebrate their heroes. He said, Michael Moles and I were walking down Buchanan Street and we couldn't go 2 yards without somebody stopping us. He says, well, we're like gods. He says, and Scottish people love their football. And it was a great insight to us. Although we love, and Hugh's right to highlight Naples, we're mental for football, and mental for Arthur. And
well, it goes back to that. It goes back to that the way we started the programme. People standing in the pouring rain, watching football, and you get it all down the chain. I'll be going to Blantyre Vixen Saturday, and you'll get people there. Rain, hail, or shine. I think football's really underrated in Scotland, certainly by the ruling classes. Its importance as a culture. Really culturally underrated.
Absolutely, and the great thing about that's why I love you in the programme. Not only can you name drop relentlessly, but he's a man of the people. He's been from Naples to Blantyre. He can just drop it up and down.
But that's the thing. I love football. I mean, the thing about it is sometimes when you're driving in the winter to Inverkeithing Swifts, as I do, right, and you see yourself, I'm hurtling towards 70. And I've got a pension.
Miles an hour?
No, definitely not miles an hour. Not my motor. Well, it's a very steep hill or even a cliff. I couldn't do 70 mile an hour if it was Thelma and Louise.
Listen, before we finish, I always like to get a wee top 10 because Ali hates it. Ali hates it. It's as simple as that.
If ever there's a reason for doing it.
Well, if there's a reason for me to annoy her, it's this. And I was looking at Aberdeen, who produced a free kick, and I'm a big fan of guys like Austin McPhee and other free kick specialists. I mean, I ran into the boy on holiday, Alan Russell. Remember, he played for Airdrie up front, and he just has made a career out of coaching strikers on.
Is he in the England setup?
Yeah, he was in the England setup. But heat maps, where strikers are going to get the greatest percentage of chances, where you run, where you're going to score the goals. Those fine margins, and you're talking about levels that we all talk about. One country wanting to win the World Cup, but Aberdeen played a free kick, and I thought, wow, it was just somebody had worked on it in the training ground. I think we should embrace free kick specialists and people who come up with ingenious set pieces that give us goals with a bit of thought into it.
A bit of creativity.
A bit of creativity. And then, of course, the other thing about it is people say, yes, but there are certain people who don't really need to embrace an ingenious moment from a free kick. And I started looking at all the best free kick guys who just walk up, cut all the ball over the wall, and you know, it's in the back of the net. So I've got a list here, and it's global. So do you want to have a stab at one of them or two that you think are the absolute best, Hugh?
Well, the best for me, it was Junior Pernambuco, who was, you know, he was just a great one.
Juninho, his name, but at Leon, yeah.
You know, sorry. He just had a record wherever he went of different free kicks. But I'll go back old time for me. I probably wasn't on the list, but I'll go back old time to a guy called Garrincha, right?
Yes.
Who actually started, he created the expression, you sometimes hear it quite a lot, the falling leaf, they called it. And that's the way he took a free kick that went up high, and then it just dropped into the corner. And that was with the old ball and all that.
Yes.
So Garrincha, I'm talking about 58, 62. So he would be. And the other one is my great World Cup of all time is 1970. And there was a guy who didn't do the falling leaf. He just did the man shot out of a barrel. And that was Rivellino.
Yeah.
He just came up and hit it as hard as a ball could possibly hit.
Yeah.
So they would be top of it. And I remember the Davy Cooper one against Celtic once, where he just came up. I think it was, for some reason, I think it was a League Cup. Anyway.
It was League Cup against Aberdeen.
Was it Aberdeen? Yeah.
Rifled it into the roof of the net.
It just hit it right into the stanchion as if this is what you do. There was no other way to do this. And it was like that thing in football. I always think in football, one of the great things in football is taking a deep breath, going, oh, and that was one of them that gives you a, oh.
I'm glad you highlighted Garrincha, because Juninho, that you're talking about, played for Leon and Brazil. He also had that ability, like Cristiano Ronaldo, where they can get the ball up and then it dips at the last minute, which is fantastic. Have you got two or three in your mind?
Pirlo was absolutely sensational at free kicks. Specific free kicks, a couple. David Beckham's for England in the last minute to get them to the World Cup against Greece in 2000, maybe, round about that time anyway. Just when it had to be done. Another one that we had a quick look back at just before we came on here was the Dutch free kick against Argentina in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. They were 2-1 down in the last minute, and they got a free kick on the edge of the box, and everybody expected they would just go over the conventional, but they didn't. They played it in short to the boy on the edge of the wall, Wout Weghorst, who went to Man United and did nothing, and they just played it short to him, and he scored to take the game into extra time. They eventually lost, but it was just a bit of invention that you don't normally see, particularly in a high pressurised situation where every bone in the body is probably screaming out, just have a shot. Just have a shot, you know.
It was a great goal.
It was a fantastic goal. But throughout the years, there's all been, like, even these days, James Ward-Prowse is fantastic at that in free kicks.
He is, yeah.
You know, it's a skill to have.
Yeah. Ali, have you got a few in mind? I like the fact that David threw in there. Great that you got his name, because I couldn't think of it for the life of me. Wout Weghorst, and his agent says, and now we're going to kill your career off. You're going to Manchester United.
There's loads, I think. Zico.
Zico, Ruffy just still has chills about it.
I bet.
And Ruffy's chills about a few. Kubias as well.
Yeah,
of course.
Kubias, I didn't even have Kubias down. That's a shirt I want.
Andy Ritchie.
He's not forgiving. Thank God you said that, Hugh. I had Andy Ritchie down. Morton, because...
If you're going for Scott, Lee Griffiths. Did a good
Lee Griffiths was
his
good.
Hampden moments with the two.
Alberts comes back to mind for Rangers. He was one of the, let's do this quite simply. How hard can I hit this?
And if you get in the road of it, you're going with it as well. Although I must, if you get a chance, it's a great tale with Andy Ritchie, because if you ask Gordon Strachan and Mark McGee to regale their tales of him, because he was so good and so skillful. Sir Alex Ferguson, in his day as Fergie, the manager of Aberdeen, had said to them in the build-up to a game against Morton, whatever you do, do not let this guy anywhere near our box, because he's crazy, he'll kill you. And he was going mental at them. And he said... He said the Aberdeen team walked onto the park at Pittodrie, and Andy Ritchie hit the ball from the halfway line from the centre, and Leighton scurried back, and all you can see is the red mist coming out of Fergie as they could do nothing about it. But and Pele, of course. Can't forget Pele. Ronald Koeman.
You could hit them.
He was a belter. And there was another guy which I don't know and I can't remember, but I did look up the fact that Victor Legratari of Argentina, he stayed over in Argentina, never moved, but he had Inter Milan and Real Madrid all interested in him at the time, and he'd scored 66 goals from set pieces, which was no mean feat. We'd gone through, of course, you mentioned Napoli and Maradona. You've got to mention him because he hit one against Juventus that defied belief from a free kick.
But he did. I go down. Don't start with Maradona because I'll go down a complete and utter rabbit hole with him. But
Yeah.
I mean, his ability. The thing with Maradona was he had power, but he also had that wonderful thing. Always looks better on the left foot as well. Of being able to manipulate the ball.
Yeah.
And he could do everything. You know, it was just wonderful to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you could come up with a few more great free kick specialists and great set pieces as well. It's been a joy. We've been from Blantyre Vicks to Naples and back again with Hugh MacDonald as ever. Some of you were getting on a high, optimistic about change in Scottish football, but as ever, Ali just put on her black cape and brought that case to a close. Great to have David McCarthy with us as well, and he will be back with us on the Journos. I can assure you of that. If you have enjoyed the Journos on podcast or indeed on our YouTube channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share and follow us if you can. And if you download the app, you'll get all that breaking news at your fingertips. And there's some big news coming up on PLZ Soccer this month. Lots more programming for you to enjoy, lots more unique video content and some special things that we're going to offer to you. So from David, from Hugh, Alison and myself, Peter Martin, thank you for listening and watching.